Hello, and welcome back to another great session called Software Development Processes. What do you mean by software development process? Actually, the software process, which is also known as a software methodology, is a set of related activities that leads to the production of the software. These activities may involve the development of the software from the scratch or modifying an existing system. Why do you want to learn about software development process? Just think about this. The mobile app which you're going to develop is actually a development of the software within the mobile users, for the mobile users. So does it not fair to understand, does it not fair to know about what are the different software development processes which you can use? Because the processes makes the team to work systematically. It's when it involves multiple activities. So any software process must include the following 4 activities. So activity number 1, software specification or the requirements engineering. Define the main functionalities of the software and the constraints around them. When I said requirements, probably you might be thinking about the requirements which are required for the mobile app development, how my front end should look like, how my functionality should look like, how my features should have a navigation. So if I click on in this particular button, so where the app screen should take me, what are the different steps involved in in following that particular feature. So these are the software specifications. So these are specifications which are very much required before you start any development. Software design and the implementation. The software is to be designed and programmed. So in the design phase, probably you would be prototyping, this is how my first screen should look like, and second screen should look like with these features. So this is all the design phase, and the implementation is as per the design. The developer would, program that those interfaces and program any of the things which are happening on the back end. Software verification and validation. The software must conform to its specification and meets the customer needs. So when I say software verification and validation, it's basically like quality assurance. You have to make sure whether whatever the requirements I gave it to the development team, whether they have implemented the same or not. That's very important. That's called as quality assurance. And the fourth one is software evolution, which is also called as software maintenance. The software is being modified to meet the customer and the market requirement changes. Say, for example, you have released the software and tomorrow there is a change in the market, and that change you need to adopt it to your software product. Then it comes to software evolution where you make those changes. So in practice, when you look at practically, they include sub-activities like the requirement validation, architectural design, unit testing, etc., etc. There are also supporting activities such as configuration and change management, quality assurance, project management, and user experience. Along with the other experiences of the activities, along with the other activities, aim to improve the above activities by introducing the new techniques, tools, following the best practice, process standardization, so the delivery of the software process is reduced and it's always smooth. When we talk about a process, we usually talk about the activities in it. However, a process can also include the process description, which includes the products. The outcomes of an activity, for example, the outcome of architectural design may be a model for the software architecture. The roles, the responsibilities of the people involved in the process, for example, the project manager or a programmer or a test lead or a quality assurance lead or a front-end designer. So there are different roles in it. pre and post conditions, the conditions that must be true before and after an activity. For example, the precondition of the architectural design is the requirements have been approved by the customer, while the post condition is the diagrams describing the architectural have been reviewed. So the software process is very complex. It relies on making the decisions. There is no ideal process, and most organizations have developed their own software process. For example, an organization works on the critical system has a very structured process, while with the business systems, with the rapidly changing requirements, a less formal, flexible process is likely to be more effective. Okay, then what are the different software process are available currently in the market? There are 5 different software development processes which are currently followed by many IT organizations in the market. So first one is waterfall model, second one is prototyping, and third one is incremental development, fourth one is iterative development, and agile. So among all of this, the waterfall, agile, and iterative development and incremental development are still used by the many IT organizations, while the prototyping is not much used these days. So in that case, let's learn about all these 3 important the software development processes. First one is waterfall model. So what is this waterfall model? So the phases of the waterfall models are basically defining the requirements, and then which is followed by the system and software design. You implement it and you unit test it, and after unit testing it, you integrate it and system test it, and finally, once it is gone to the production, it will be in operation and maintenance. So the waterfall model is a sequential approach where each fundamental activity is of a process represented as a separate phase arranged in the linear order. Like I have shown here, the process and the activities performed in the waterfall are linear. In the waterfall model, you must plan and schedule all of the activities before starting working on them. Plan-driven process is a process where all the activities are planned first and the progress is measured against the plan. While the agile process planning is incremental and it's easier to change the process to reflect the requirement changes. I will come to agile later. I just had a small comparison with agile just now. The phases of the waterfall model are requirements, design, implementation, testing, and finally it goes to the maintenance. So when you are going to use the waterfall model, in principle, the waterfall model should only be applied when requirements are well understood and unlikely to change radically during the development. And this model has a relatively rigid structure which makes it relatively hard to accommodate change when the process is underway. So to know you, right, the waterfall model is used heavily when the IT as a process started. During those days, the requirements were not changing dynamically, and the requirements were kind of frozen, and the market was not really demanding for the frequent changes. This waterfall model is suitable for those kind of projects where you cannot expect much volatility in your software and the way the software is being used by the end users. Okay, so just now we learned about the waterfall model. So let's quickly look at what are the pros and cons of the waterfall model. So it's useful when the requirements are clear or following a very structured process, as in critical system, which needs a detailed, precise, and accurate documents describes the system to be produced. So what is the cons? Not good when the requirements are ambiguous and does not support frequent interaction with the customers for the feedback and proposing the changes. It's not suitable for the large projects that might take a long time to be developed and delivered. Okay, let's learn about incremental and iterative development. Though I showed you the incremental and iterative development are 2 separate processes, but most of the the process and the activities which are there for both incremental and iterative are same except one or two differences. I would quickly explain you what exactly the difference between incremental and iterative development. Let's talk a little bit about both the process as a one process where both the activities, most of the activities are same. What is incremental development? Incremental development is based on the idea of developing an initial implementation, exposing this to the user feedback, and evolving it through the several versions until an acceptable system has been developed. The activities of a process are not separated but interrelated, and with the feedback involved across those activities. This is the incremental development model. High-level requirements are first, prepared, and then the specification and the development and the validation. The first version is developed, and the second version, third versions are developed, and they are tested at the same time. And finally, the final version is, worked upon, and which is ready for the release. Each system increment reflects a piece of the functionality that is needed by the customers. So generally, the early increment of the system should include the most important or the most urgently required functionality. So this means that the customer can evaluate the system at early stage in the development to see if it delivers what's required. If not, then only the current increment current increment has to be changed and possibly new functionality defined for the later increments. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. So before we move, so what are the when you can really use this incremental or iterative development? They are suited for the large projects, very less expensive to the change of the requirement as they support customer interactions with each increment. Initial versions of the software are produced early, which facilitates customer evaluation and feedback. Third one is the agile software development. Agile software development, when to use? It suits for the small, medium-sized projects with a rapidly changes in the requirements as the customers involved during each phase. Agile software development is the one of the method which is more popular. Again, in agile, there are various different flavors associated with agile software development. But again, the bottom line is, the agile software development basically accepts frequent changes. Very limited planning is required to get started with a project. It helps the company in saving time and the money. So when I say very limited planning is required to get started with a project, is basically like you're not going to accept anything in huge quantity. So if you're developing certain features, then you would have to break down those features. Basically, you have to decompose those features into small features, and you would accept only the features which you can deliver in a certain time frame. So, and the daily meetings make it possible to measure the productivity. When I say daily meetings, is basically the daily stand-up meetings where the team quickly gather for a short amount of time, 5 to 10 minutes, and quickly they discuss about what they did yesterday, what they're going to do it today, and is there any the roadblocks or is there any impediments in what they are doing. So those kind of meetings, if you're able to conduct, then this agile software development would be a very helpful approach. What are the different cons? Difficult to scale up to a large projects where the documentation is essential. A highly skilled team is also needed. So these days you might have seen because of this particular issue, right? Whatever the Scrum and the old version of the agile process people were using, they were not able to scale up to a large projects. Now it has come something called scaled agile, where they can scale up to a large projects. So if the team members aren't committed, the project will either never complete or fail, and there always be a limitation in time, like in increments, meetings, etc. Since agile software development, as you see in this infographics, right, it involves a lot of the team members where they involved in multiple activities like daily stand-up meetings, sprint planning, sprint retrospective, and sprint backlog scrubbing. There are various activities which are involved in agile software software development. Sometimes the team might feel like they're not having sufficient time for developing any of the features. So let me have a quickly walkthrough of this infographics. So in agile software development, typically a team is involved about 5 to 7 team members, and they would have a dedicated product owner, and this product owner would provide the requirements to the team, and team would discuss about those requirements and internally, and they have any questions they would ask the product owner to clarify it. And then once they are comfortable with the requirements, and they would have a planning meeting where they would commit for the backlog in that particular sprint. When I say sprint, it can be like 2-week sprint or 3-week sprint or a month sprint. It depends on what their organization says and what the business basically demands. So once they are done with the planning, then that would go to sprint backlogs. So sprint backlogs are essentially the one which they have committed within the sprint. Now, the Scrum Master is a person who would basically facilitate when the sprint has to start, when the sprint has to end, and if any of the team member faces any impediments, then the Scrum Master would help in bulldozing those impediments or roadblocks. So daily stand-up meeting is essentially the one which the team conducts on a regular basis at the early morning. When they come to the office, they quickly gather and they talk about what they did yesterday and what they are going to do it today, and what are the the impediments. And sprint review process is something like so what they have done good, what they have done something bad, where they can improve it. And sprint release is something at the end of the sprint. If you're releasing some of the features to the end users, then it is called a sprint release. And sprint retrospective, it's again you have to the team is retrospecting itself, what went wrong and what went good, any of the improvements they need to take. So this software development process itself is a huge topic. So if I want to talk about each type of the software development process, then it's going to be a individual course. I don't want to deep dive into a very detailed level of software development process. This particular lesson I thought of including before. I thought of not including it, but since the mobile app development is also a software development process, so the one as an app owner, you should be aware of the process, because if you follow the process right, there would be a discipline in whatever you're doing. And especially like agile software development, you're going to have frequent the meetings, and the team would come forward and they discuss about if they have any impediments, so you can talk about all of them, and probably you can provide even the solution as well. So it's always good to follow the process so that you would be able to achieve or you would be able to deliver which you are committed to your end customers basically on time. So I would recommend, please follow any of these processes, or if you think any of the other processes are very much important, you feel important, then follow those processes. Thank you for listening. I will see you in the next topic.